The Hourglass. I invite you to listen to my new dramatic story about a military man's honor, betrayal, and righteous retribution. I'm confident it won't disappoint. Please support with a like and subscription if you enjoy. Chapter 1. My name is Jack Harper. I'm 36 years old, and recently I discovered I'm terminally ill. Or at least, that's what they told me. 15 years in Special Forces taught me many things. How to survive in the desert with just a knife, how to kill a man in 16 different ways, how to endure torture without breaking. But now I have a new enemy, time, and possibly a couple more enemies of flesh and blood. 1. Dr. Langley's office resembled an expensive hotel suite more than a medical facility. Plush leather chairs, artwork on the walls, subdued lighting. A tasteless shrine to those who mistake money for meaning. I sat across from him as he leafed through my chart with deliberate slowness, like an actor meticulously counting the beats before delivering his lines. "Mr. Harper," he raised his eyes and removed thin gold-rimmed glasses. "I'm afraid the news isn't good." Eliza squeezed my hand, too tightly. In moments like these, people instinctively seek contact. But for me, the world slowed and separated into components, like before a capture operation. Scent, Langley's light cologne mingled with the antiseptic. Sound, the air conditioner running at minimal power, creating a barely noticeable background noise. Touch, Eliza's hand felt like sandpaper against my skin. "What's the prognosis?" I asked, not wasting time on superfluous words. Langley paused, a theatrical pause from a man accustomed to the drama of his profession. "Progressive neuroimmune myelopathy, a rare autoimmune disease where your body attacks its own nervous system. It begins with peripheral nerves and—" "Time, doctor, how long do I have?" Something flashed in Langley's eyes, irritation. He wasn't used to being deprived of delivering an impressive medical speech. "About 12 months, perhaps a bit longer with aggressive therapy." 12 months, Eliza whimpered, pressing against my shoulder. Strangely, I felt no shock. In Fallujah, we once took mortar fire. The house sheltering my unit crumbled like a house of cards. 2 of my men died instantly. I remember that crystalline clarity when dust and smoke mingled and time stretched into infinity. Now I felt the same. "What are the symptoms? How will it happen?" I asked with the same inflection I would use to request intelligence data before a mission. Langley smiled, a strange, professional smile he must have practiced in front of a mirror. "Initially, headaches, dizziness, weakness. Then loss of sensation in the extremities, coordination problems. In the final stage, partial paralysis, breathing difficulties, cognitive impairment." "So I'll die slowly and ugly," I interrupted him. "Jack," Eliza admonished me. But something in her voice sounded false. Not genuine indignation, but an imitation of it, as if she were playing the role of a caring wife for an audience. "Yes, Mr. Harper, of course, we can alleviate the symptoms. There's experimental therapy." "No." "Excuse me. No therapy, no hospitals. If I have 12 months left, I won't spend them here." Langley and Eliza exchanged quick glances. I almost missed it, a tiny moment of silent communication. "Jack, darling, you need treatment." Eliza spoke in a tone used for disobedient children. "Need? Who says I need it?" I turned to her. "I've been through 5 circles of hell, and if I'm about to go through the 6th, it won't be on a hospital bed." Unexpectedly, Langley nodded with something resembling respect. "I understand your decision, Mr. Harper. However, you must take certain medications. They'll help control the symptoms and quality of life." He wrote prescriptions, gave brochures, scheduled regular tests. I nodded, thinking of other things. There was a certain clarity in 12 months, a definite line, no maybes or "we'll see." A strange relief knowing exactly when the end would come. When we left his office, a plan was already forming in my head. If I was going to die, I'd do it on my terms. 2. The Great Barrier Reef unfurled beneath me like an alien landscape. I descended deeper, toward a 6-foot tiger shark lazily gliding between coral formations. Don't believe the movies, these creatures rarely attack without reason. But in their eyes, the absolute emptiness of existence, or simply put, either you're food or you're not. I aimed the underwater camera as the predator swam within 3 feet of me. Adrenaline sharpened my senses, my brain working like a Swiss watch. 2 months had passed since that conversation with Langley. I had left my wife almost all our money, keeping only enough to fulfill my dying wishes, sold my share in the security firm I founded after leaving service, and composed a list. It couldn't be called a banal bucket list. Rather, it was a tactical plan for a final operation. New Zealand became the first checkpoint, skydiving over the Milford Sound fjords. When I stepped into the abyss from an altitude of 4 kilometers, the sensation was almost like a revelation. I wasn't afraid. After so many years of crawling nightmares, after sweaty awakenings from scenes of killings and explosions, nothing. Just the pure clarity of free fall. Then Australia and cage-free shark diving. The local instructor, a sun-baked, lean aboriginal, assessed me with a knowing eye. Usually such requests come from suicidal people or psychopaths. Which one are you, mate? A dying man, I answered honestly. His gaze softened. Then you're in the right place. The ocean heals, even when it can't cure. I understood what he meant when the massive tiger shark swam so close that I could distinguish every scar on its skin, a mixture of primal fear and strange serenity. I was just another creature in the ocean, neither special nor insignificant. The Himalayas became the next challenge. Not the commercial Everest, but the less famous yet more technical Manaslu. At an altitude of over 5,000 meters, in a camp with piercing cold and thin air, I met a Nepalese monk. He was meditating on a rock, wrapped only in thin saffron cloth while everyone else was bundled in down jackets and thermal underwear. "You have the eyes of a man who has died many times," he said to me in flawless English. "Death is not your enemy, she is your old acquaintance." "How would you know?" I smirked, offering him a thermos of hot tea. "When you meditate long enough, you begin to feel time in people. Yours is like an hourglass, simultaneously running out, but also returning." I wanted to say it was nonsense, but couldn't. There was something hypnotic in his eyes. "In this life I too am a soldier," the monk unexpectedly added. "Only my battle is within." That night, for the first time in months, I didn't have a nightmare. With each new adventure, climbing Kilimanjaro, crossing the Atacama Desert, rafting the turbulent rivers of Alaska, I felt like I was returning to my true self. Eliza called less frequently. When I asked about her affairs, she answered curtly, but interrogated me in detail about whether I was taking the medications prescribed by Langley. "I'm worried, Jack. You're so far away and your condition." "Never felt better." "That's not normal. Dr. Langley says you should be experiencing certain symptoms." And I did experience them. Or rather, I tried to imitate them in our conversations. I lied about dizziness, weakness, and numbness in my fingers. Strangely, each time I took the pills, these symptoms actually appeared: vivid flashes of disorientation, nausea, and impaired coordination. But as soon as I skipped a couple of days, I felt healthy again. In a Tibetan hotel, after a 3-day endurance test when my body should have been exhausted, I suddenly realized a strange pattern. I took out the bottle of pills and examined it carefully. No pharmaceutical company markings, just a printed name and dosage. That evening I flushed half the contents down the toilet. Of course, there was another factor. While I was living this strange, adrenaline-filled year, my personal account for fulfilling wishes was rapidly approaching zero. But does that matter when the sand in the hourglass is almost gone? 3. The plane landed in Boston at 2 in the morning. The last days in Thailand, where I trained in Muay Thai with local masters, left a new collection of bruises on my body, purple-yellow testimonies that I could still feel pain. According to the original plan, I was supposed to return in 4 weeks by the calculated end. But an unbidden internal impulse made me change my ticket and fly back earlier. Intuition, a fighter's best friend, especially when it comes to survival. The taxi dropped me off in the suburbs where Eliza and I had bought a house 3 years ago. A brick building in colonial style with a neat garden that she adored and a 2-car garage where I had set up a workshop. The American dream for a retired Special Forces operator with PTSD and his beautiful wife. It was 3:15 a.m., but the bedroom light was on. Eliza had always been a night owl. I paid the taxi driver and took a small gym bag, all that remained of my previous life. I moved slowly up the driveway, automatically noting the dark silhouette of an unfamiliar car. A latest model Mercedes S-Class, too expensive for our neighborhood. The front door was unlocked. Another warning sign. Eliza had always been obsessed with security, even when I explained that a good lock is only an illusion of protection. I entered the dark hall silently. The smell hit my nostrils immediately, expensive men's cologne I never used. Bergamot 22 by Le Labo, the kind Langley wore at our meetings. Trained instincts automatically kicked in. I became a sensor, registering every detail. 2 wine glasses on the kitchen table, one with remnants of red wine and a lipstick imprint. A man's coat on the rack, not my size and not my style. On the hallway table, 2 mobile phones. One, with a cracked screen, belonged to Eliza. The second, in a thin leather case, clearly did not. And the most obvious signal, laughter. Female, breathy, tinkling through the not completely closed door of the second-floor bedroom. My pulse slowed, vision sharpened. Time stretched out, as happens in moments of mortal danger. I gently set my bag on the floor and began climbing the stairs. 15 years of special operations had taught me to move silently, even on creaky parquet. My thoughts slid cold and clear. There was no primitive jealousy or anger, only tactical analysis of the situation. As if this mission had been planned long ago, and now I was simply executing an already familiar scenario. 4. The second floor of our house has a simple layout, a corridor with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. The master bedroom is at the far end, overlooking the garden. The door was ajar by a few inches, a strip of warm light falling on the dark corridor. I slid along the wall as I had done thousands of times in the dark alleys of Baghdad and Kandahar. Approaching the door, I froze. The laughter had subsided, replaced by muffled voices. I didn't try to peek inside, it was enough to hear. "Are you sure he won't return for another month?" It was Langley. His voice sounded relaxed. "Absolutely, Eliza. The last time he called, he could barely speak coherently. The pills are working even better than you promised." And the financial side? All under control. He signed power of attorney to me right at the beginning. The insurance is fully processed. I'm listed as the sole beneficiary. Good thing we managed before his adventures. He wouldn't have passed the medical examination for such a large sum now. 3 million, darling. And the house. We can finally open that private clinic you've been dreaming of. I silently shifted slightly to the left, where the narrow gap between the door and the jamb allowed me to see part of the room. Our bed, or rather now apparently their bed. I could only see Eliza partially, a bare shoulder, a cascade of dark hair. Langley sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me, in an unbuttoned shirt. "When can I wear it openly?" asked Eliza, and I noticed a gleam. She brought her hand to the light. Around her neck on a chain hung a ring. Not a simple one, clearly an engagement ring, with a large diamond that sparkled in the light of the bedside lamp. "As soon as it's all over," Langley replied. "We'll wait an appropriate period after the funeral, and then we can announce the engagement. No one will suspect a connection." "And Jack still doesn't suspect anything?" Her voice sounded somewhere between mockery and disbelief. He believes every word. Military men are the most gullible patients, used to trusting authorities and following instructions. Give them a convincing diagnosis and a couple of powerful drugs, and they'll never doubt. Eliza laughed. It's so ironic. All those stories about how he survived hell, how he could read people like a book. And now, by the end of the month, he won't be able to function independently anymore. Then, hospice. My fingers involuntarily clenched into fists. A simple thought flashed through my head, 3 steps to the bed, and Langley would never utter another word. I knew 17 ways to kill a man with my bare hands, many of them silently. But the cold, calculating part of my brain took over. Information. I needed more information. They were talking about a plan, about hospice, about medications. I remembered the strange, unmarked pills, the dizziness and weakness that came after taking the medicine and disappeared when I threw them away. I silently retreated back down the corridor, descended the stairs. My bag was still by the door. I took it and left, carefully closing the door behind me. The cold night air was sobering. I walked away from the house without looking back. With each step my rage grew, the slow, cold rage of a man betrayed by those closest to him. But behind it a plan was already forming. Tactical, like all plans in my life. 5. The Last Nail, a bar in the industrial district where dockers usually stop after shifts and other people who have good reasons not to look each other in the eye. I knew this place from the time of my first discharge, when I needed anonymity and strong alcohol. The whiskey flowed straight into my bloodstream, creating an illusion of warmth. I sat at a table in the back and methodically got drunk, measured, purposeful, as if performing an assigned task. Tough day, the bartender, a bald man with tattoos on his neck, placed another portion in front of me. Tough life, I replied. I get it, brother, served myself. 3rd Infantry, Iraq 2005. I nodded. Between veterans, there's no need for extra words. You know what's funniest about dying? I asked after the 5th or 6th portion. That you still die alone, even if someone swore to be by your side. The bartender just shook his head. Dying ain't funny, brother. Whatever happened, don't rush things. The last thing I remember clearly, paying with bills from my wallet. Then I walked out into the rain, mechanically turning up my jacket collar. I remember the screech of brakes, blinding headlights, impact with my left hip against the hood, no pain, just surprise as my body lost orientation in space, flight, and darkness covering my consciousness like a blanket. The awakening was agonizing. Sharp smell of antiseptic, piercing beep of medical equipment, pain pulsating in every cell of my body, especially in my left side. Welcome back to the land of the living, Mr. Harper. The voice belonged to a woman, an Asian woman around 50, in a white coat with a badge reading Dr. Chen. Where am I? My voice sounded like sandpaper. St. Elizabeth's Memorial Hospital. You were hit by a car. 2 broken ribs, a bruised kidney, mild concussion. But you're lucky, no internal bleeding or head trauma. I slowly scanned the room. A hospital ward, but not the hospital where Langley worked. How did I get here? An ambulance picked you up on 23rd Street. Standard procedure, the nearest hospital with a trauma unit. Dr. Chen approached the monitors, checked the readings, and made a note on a tablet. Mr. Harper, there's something strange about your test results. In what way? According to our data, you have perfect readings for a man your age. No traces of the autoimmune disease mentioned in your medical records. I tried to sit up, wincing from pain. I don't understand. When we requested your medical history, we received data about progressive neuroimmune myelopathy in the terminal stage. But your current tests show nothing of the sort. On the contrary, except for the injuries sustained in the accident, you're healthier than many 30-year-olds. My mind worked feverishly, assembling the puzzle. The conversation between Eliza and Langley, the strange medications, symptoms appearing only after taking the pills. Dr. Chen, may I ask you for something? Don't report my presence here to anyone, especially to Dr. Langley's clinic. She frowned. That's an unusual request. I know my voice sounded calmer than I felt, but I have reason to believe that my diagnosis was fabricated. Her eyes widened. That's a serious accusation. And deliberately poisoning a patient under the guise of treatment is a serious crime. She was silent, then nodded. I saw strange traces of toxins in your blood. At first, I thought they were side effects of medications for your supposed illness. But these substances aren't used in standard protocols for treating neuroimmune diseases. What substances are these? A cocktail of low-concentration neurotoxins. In small doses, they cause symptoms similar to progressive nervous diseases, dizziness, impaired coordination, muscle weakness, cognitive disorders, and slowly kill the patient. With prolonged use, yes. I looked out the ward window. The rain was still drumming against the glass. The world beyond it suddenly became crystal clear, as happened only in moments of highest danger. Dr. Chen, I need your recommendations. What would you do if you found out someone was trying to kill you with a fake diagnosis? She looked at me with a long, evaluating gaze. I would gather evidence, she finally said, and I would be very careful. Zix. When I called Eliza, I heard more panic in her voice than I expected. Jack, where are you? The police reported that you returned to the city and were hit by a car. Are you okay? I imagined her face, brown eyes widened in feigned concern, perfectly lined eyebrows drawn together in pretended anxiety. I'm in the hospital. My voice sounded weaker than usual. I deliberately added breathlessness. I don't remember what happened, woke up here. Which hospital? I'll come right away. St. Elizabeth's. I was hit by a car. I coughed, intentionally heavy and hoarse. Oh my God, Alex. Dr. Langley is with me. We're leaving right now. Alex, so they were already on a first-name basis. With the doctor, I had only seen in formal settings. Dr. Chen stood beside me, listening to the conversation. After the call ended, she sank into the chair by the bed. So I take it there's a plan. Yes, I sat up straighter, dropping the pretended weakness. But I need your help. When Eliza and Langley burst into the ward an hour later, they saw what they expected, an emaciated man with a pale face, connected to an IV drip. Darling, Eliza rushed to me, embracing me with exaggerated care. We were so worried. Langley maintained a professional distance, but poorly concealed anger flashed in his eyes. What happened, Jack? You were supposed to be in Thailand. I decided to come back early, wanted to surprise you. I again imitated a coughing fit, and instead received a surprise from a careless driver. Dr. Chen entered the ward with a tablet. Dr. Langley, I'm Dr. Chen, Mr. Harper's attending physician. May I speak with you about his condition? They moved to a corner of the ward. I saw Langley tense when Chen began showing him some graphs on the tablet. His condition is much worse than I expected, Langley said loudly. This accident could have accelerated the progression of the disease. Interesting that you mentioned progression. Dr. Chen elegantly tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear. When our tests show no signs of the underlying disease indicated in his chart. Langley paled but quickly composed himself. You obviously haven't conducted specific tests for progressive neuroimmune myelopathy. It's a rare disease with. I'm familiar with this pathology, Dr. Langley, and we did run a full spectrum of analyses. Let me show you the results. While they dove into the discussion, Eliza returned to my bedside. Her hand fell on mine, cold fingers with perfectly manicured nails gripping my limp wrist. Sweetie, it's all right. Soon we'll take you home and I'll take care of you. You look happy, I whispered, watching her reaction. What? Of course not. I'm terribly worried. No, happy, radiant, as if something good happened in your life. Jack, it's the drugs talking. You know hallucinations are part of your condition. I noticed how her other hand involuntarily jerked to her neck, where the chain with the ring was hidden under her blouse. Langley returned to us, his face a mask of professional concern. We need to transfer you to my clinic immediately, Jack. This accident could have seriously affected the course of your disease. Dr. Chen objected. With all due respect, Dr. Langley, my patient isn't stable enough for transport yet. From a purely medical standpoint, Langley spoke through gritted teeth, his condition requires specialized care that your hospital cannot provide. Chen remained impassive. Doesn't our disagreement about the very existence of the diagnosis call into question the necessity of such care? I saw Langley barely containing his fury, his fingers clenching and unclenching, an involuntary gesture of a man ready for violence. Eliza, I addressed my wife in a voice weaker than necessary, I think. I need some time here, Dr. Chen. She's helping me. But Jack, her eyes widened in genuine surprise, Alex has been treating you from the beginning. He knows everything about your condition. That's exactly what worries me. I closed my eyes, pretending to be exhausted. Please, give me a few days. Langley stepped toward the bed. Jack, you don't understand. The longer you stay without proper treatment, the more you risk. I looked him straight in the eyes. Risk what, doctor? We stared at each other, and I saw fear flash behind the professional facade. He was the first to look away. Give him a couple of days to recover from the trauma, Dr. Chen said. After that, I'll personally oversee his transfer to your clinic if necessary. When they finally left, I took a deep breath. Dr. Chen locked the ward door and turned to me. They'll be back, and with lawyers. I know, I sat up in bed. We have 2, maximum 3 days before they find a way to get me out of here. And then what? Then I'll let them do it. I saw her surprise and explained. I need to find out how deep this scheme goes, where the hospice is, other patients, documents. The only way is to let them continue their game while I play mine. Dr. Chen silently looked at me. You understand you're risking your life. These people have already tried to slowly kill you, if they realize you know the truth. Risk is part of my profession. I straightened up, feeling the pain in my ribs but ignoring it. And now I have an advantage I didn't have before. What's that? They think I'm dying. I know I'm alive, and I intend to stay that way as long as possible. I opened my clenched fist, showing a miniature voice recorder, recording of the entire conversation with Langley and Eliza. This is just the beginning, Dr. Chen. The hourglass has been turned, and now time is working for me. Chapter 2. 3 days in the hospital gave me time to formulate a plan. Dr. Chen provided cover, according to the official story. My condition was deteriorating due to the underlying disease, complicated by injuries. Eliza and Langley had to play by my rules, though they thought the game followed their script. 15 years in special forces taught me the main thing. In an undercover operation, success depends on 2 things: how convincingly you lie and how accurately you know the truth. I lied virtuously. And I was determined to learn the whole truth, not just for myself, but for everyone who had already fallen victim to their scheme. 1. Eliza met me at the threshold of our home with the professional care of a nurse and the insincerity of a B-movie actress. Langley had arranged my discharge from St. Elizabeth's, a wheelchair, special bed in the living room, and a battery of new medications were ready for my return. You need to rest, darling, Eliza chirped, helping me settle into bed. Alex says your condition is deteriorating faster than expected. That terrible accident. I feigned a bout of trembling, watching as her gaze momentarily flashed. not with concern, but with something resembling satisfaction. "You know," I whispered, "in the Himalayas I met a monk. He said death is my old acquaintance." "Jack, you've always been prone to dramatics." She adjusted the pillow under my head. "This is just another battle. We'll manage." "We? What an amazing pronoun in the mouth of someone planning your death." The next morning, Langley arrived. He examined me with demonstrative thoroughness, replaced the IV drip, and increased the dosage of medications. "The progression is faster than we expected," he told Eliza as if I weren't in the room. "We need to adjust the protocol." "How long do I have left?" I asked, deliberately slurring my words as if I were having difficulty speaking. Their eyes met for a moment, too long a moment. "Hard to say exactly," Langley answered evasively. "But we should think in terms of weeks, not a month." When they went to the kitchen, I quickly emptied the IV drip into a special vial hidden in the mattress. Dr. Chen had agreed to analyze the composition of the medications. Now, I didn't take anything Eliza or Langley gave me. Everything went into the toilet or special containers. During their absence, I installed miniature cameras at strategic points around the house. 5 years in Special Forces intelligence taught me how to find perfect viewing angles and camouflage equipment. One in the vent above our bedroom, another in the living room wall clock, a third in the kitchen ventilation grate. On the third day, my efforts bore their first fruits. Eliza received a call when she thought I was asleep under sedatives. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she whispered, turning toward the window. "Everything is going according to plan. Yes, I personally monitor his medication intake. No, I don't observe any signs of improvement. On the contrary, he's getting worse every day." A long pause, then more quietly. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Kowalski, but Alex guarantees the insurance will be paid in full. The documents are already prepared. Yes, we discussed the possibility of transferring to hospice. Within the next week, I think." Mr. Kowalski, insurance. I added this fact to my mental investigation map. That evening, Langley came again. Eliza met him in the hallway with a long kiss. I watched through my phone monitor, connected to the hidden cameras. "How's our patient?" Langley asked. "Still moving," Eliza giggled, and something icy contracted inside me at that sound. "But getting weaker. Your new pills work wonderfully." They entered the living room, where I was pretending to sleep, with heavy, raspy breathing. "I think it's time to discuss the transfer to Eden's Haven," Langley said quietly. "In his condition." "Isn't it too early?" Eliza looked concerned, but not about me. "Not all the documents are ready yet. What if he—" "He won't recover," Langley cut her off. "And in the hospice, we can control the process much more effectively, and without extra witnesses." Eliza nodded. "All right, I'll prepare him. I'll say home care isn't sufficient. Tell him you're worried about his comfort, that you want his last days to be dignified." Their fake concern evoked in me not so much anger as the cold, calculating attention of a sniper choosing the moment to fire. I carefully snored while they discussed the details of my dignified death. 2. Eden's Haven was located an hour's drive from the city, in an isolated estate surrounded by a stone wall like a medieval castle. Through the window of the medical van, I observed a spacious park with well-maintained trees and winding paths, a perfect place for walks that none of the patients were destined to take. At the entrance, we were stopped by security, 2 men with military bearing, in dark blue uniforms with the hospice emblem. They checked documents, looked into the van, and exchanged a few words on the radio before raising the barrier. "Impressive security for a place where people come to die," I muttered, deliberately not hiding my sarcasm. "It's for the protection of patients, dear." Eliza squeezed my hand. "Very wealthy people are treated here." "Or dying," I corrected, watching her purse her lips. Langley met us at the main entrance, a three-story building in colonial style with a wide veranda and columns. He was already in a white coat with a director's badge. "Welcome to Eden's Haven," he smiled. "Your new home, Jack." "Temporary," I mentally corrected. Inside, the building resembled a strange hybrid of a five-star hotel and a hospital. Marble floors, antique furniture and artwork coexisted with medical equipment, nursing stations, and the smell of antiseptic. "This is your room." Langley opened the door to a spacious room with panoramic windows overlooking a lake. "I think you'll be comfortable here." I silently assessed the room with the habit of a special forces operator. One door, locking from the outside, I saw Langley demonstratively remove the key card from the lock and put it in his pocket. Windows with reinforced glass that didn't open. A surveillance camera in the ceiling corner, another disguised as a smoke detector. A bedside call button for staff, surely recording sound as well. "This room, it seems to be locking," I commented, feigning slight disorientation. "Standard security protocol," Langley smiled. "Some patients in the terminal stage of illness may suffer from disorientation and unintentionally harm themselves. Or intentionally escape," I thought. The staff was introduced that same day. Head nurse Mrs. Granger, a tall woman with a stony face and eyes that deliberately avoided direct contact. Two orderlies, the Rodriguez twins, silent and sturdy, moving with the professional caution of men accustomed to violence. And Mei Lin, a young intern of Chinese descent, with short black hair dyed with blue streaks and a wide, sincere smile that seemed out of place within these walls. "I'll be helping with your daily procedures, Mr. Harper," she said with a slight accent while setting up monitors next to my bed. "If you need anything, just press this button." In her eyes, I didn't see the clinical indifference displayed by the rest of the staff. By evening, they wheeled me to the common room for socialization with other patients. The spacious area with comfortable chairs, televisions, and bookshelves was filled predominantly with elderly people, most in wheelchairs. "Jack Harper," Langley introduced me to a silver-haired man with aristocratic posture. "Arthur Westingfield, former chairman of Continental Banking." Westingfield nodded indifferently, his gaze unfocused, as if looking through me. "Pleased to meet you," he pronounced with effort. The rest of the introductions followed a similar pattern. Richard Hodgkins, an oil magnate from Texas. Eleanor Price, a media mogul's widow. Garrett Clayton, a former federal judge. All of them looked successful, wealthy, and strangely absent with slowed movements and slurred speech. I recorded every detail, conducting an initial assessment of the situation, as I had done on dozens of special operations. Evacuation routes. The main entrance, always guarded, service exit with an electronic lock fire escape, only on one side of the building, apparently leading to the basement. Security systems. Cameras everywhere, perimeter security, electronic keys for staff. Schedule, staff changes every 8 hours, patient checks every 2 hours, medication distribution strictly on schedule. While Eliza talked with Mrs. Granger about the details of my stay, I observed the surroundings and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This place wasn't a hospice. It was a prison with medical service. 3. On the third night at Eden's Haven, I woke to a barely audible sound in the corridor. My body reacted before my consciousness. I was fully alert and on guard in fractions of a second, as I had learned in countless ambushes and night operations. Muffled voices, the squeak of wheels. I carefully slipped out of bed, grateful that I had already recovered enough to go without IVs. The nurses believed I was taking all the pills, which I secretly collected in a small cavity carved in the mattress. The door was locked, but over the past few days I had fashioned primitive tools from medical supplies, thin wire from an uncoiled stethoscope, a plastic card reinforced with strips of tape. The lock yielded in 15 seconds. I carefully opened the door a few millimeters. The corridor was dimly lit by night lamps. Two orderlies were wheeling a gurney with an immobile patient. I recognized Garrett Clayton, the former federal judge with whom I'd been acquainted in the common room. His face had a strange grayish tint. His eyes were half closed, but not from sleep. His pupils jerked in rapid, chaotic movements, as if trying to say something with his gaze. They turned the corner toward the service elevator. I slipped into the corridor, staying in the shadows, and followed them at a safe distance. The elevator went down, the indicator showing the basement level. I decided not to risk it and returned, memorizing this route for future investigation. The next morning, Clayton was absent from the common room. When I casually asked May about him, she quietly replied, "He got worse during the night. He's in intensive care." Something in her voice made me look more closely. Concern, fear. "Does that happen often?" I asked, feigning the indifference of a dying man. "More often than it should." She glanced around quickly and changed the subject. By lunchtime, I managed to position myself next to Arthur Westingfield, the banker. He sat in a wheelchair, staring meaninglessly at a chess game that Hodgkins was playing with himself. I noticed that his medications lay untouched on the table. "Don't like the pills, Mr. Westingfield?" I asked quietly. He slowly turned his head. "After them, I can't think." His voice sounded clearer than the day before. "I don't take them either," I whispered. "They're poisoning us." Something flashed in his eyes, a spark of awareness. "They made me sign papers," he said barely audibly. "A new will, my daughter. She's not my daughter. I've never seen that woman before." Mrs. Granger noticed our conversation and immediately approached. "Mr. Westingfield, it's time for your therapy." She gave me a warning look. "Mr. Harper, you shouldn't tire other patients." An hour later, Westingfield was no longer in the common room. I never saw him again. In the following days, I carefully explored the accessible areas of the hospice. The East Wing was completely closed to patients, doors requiring special access. The basement, where Clayton had been taken, was also inaccessible without staff key cards. Gradually, I noticed a strict hierarchy of movements. Patients were allowed only in their rooms, the common room, and on a small open terrace, always under staff supervision. Medical procedures were conducted in a special room on the first floor, with each patient accompanied by at least 2 staff members. Passing by a service room, I overheard a conversation between the orderlies. "A new batch arrives on Thursday," one of the Rodriguez twins was saying. 3 VIP clients." "Are the inheritance documents ready?" asked the other. "The lawyers have prepared everything. Standard scheme, progressive dementia, inability to make decisions, trustees." The door closed, cutting off the conversation, but I had heard enough. The patients weren't patients but prisoners, and I was one of them. 4. On the 6th day, when the hospice routine had become completely clear to me, I decided to act. At night, after the nurse had made her final rounds, I again picked the lock to my room and headed for the technical areas. The experience of intelligence operations in Afghanistan proved unexpectedly useful within the walls of Eden's Haven. The same principles: stay in the shadows, move between checks, know the locations of surveillance cameras. Air ducts and service corridors became my allies. In the medical supply closet, I found what I was looking for: components for improvised surveillance devices. Tiny cameras from disassembled medical endoscopes, transmitters from modified cardiac monitors, power from infusion pump batteries. Over 3 night excursions, I installed 5 such devices. In the common room, in the corridor near the elevator, in the procedure room in the service area, and most risky, in the ventilation grate near Langley's office. The transmitter was tuned to a frequency I could receive on a modified patient tablet issued for entertainment. Now I could see and hear what was happening at key points in the hospice without leaving my room. The results didn't take long to appear. The recordings showed systematic administration of drugs to patients not documented in official medical charts. Every evening, staff added a colorless liquid from unmarked ampules to the IV drips. After these injections, even the most active patients became sluggish and disoriented. In the procedure room, patients regularly underwent tests, the results of which weren't entered into the general charts but sent directly to Langley. I noticed that each patient had a special progression chart where the dynamics of poisoning were tracked. On the third day of observation, I recorded a conversation between Langley and Mrs. Granger in his office. "Clayton is becoming a problem," Langley was saying. "His nephew has started asking questions, demanding an independent medical examination. Perhaps we should accelerate the process for the patient in room 12, Granger coldly suggested. "He's having issues with his heirs." "Agreed. Increase the dose of neuroparalytic in the evening IV. Within 48 hours, it should look like a standard complication of his illness." They were talking about Judge Clayton. They were planning to kill him because he had become a problem. I understood that I needed irrefutable evidence. Video recordings and overheard conversations were a good start, but I needed more: the hospice archive, which stored all patient documents, financial operations, real medical records. I was certain I would find evidence of dozens of murders disguised as natural deaths there. I needed access to the archive, and for that I needed help. 5. Maylin turned out to be exactly the person who could help. I noticed her interest in military topics in the very first days. Her tablet always had books about modern conflicts open, documentaries about special operations. Once she saw me observing her reading and smiled sheepishly. "Strange hobby for a nurse, huh?" "Unusual," I agreed. "Why military topics specifically?" "My brother, he wanted to join the military." Her eyes dimmed. "Didn't work out because of leukemia. I became a nurse partly because of him. And I became a soldier because I didn't know what else I could be." I allowed sincerity to slip into my voice for the first time in a long while. This was how our relationship began: cautious, gradual. Every day she spent a little more time with me than protocol required. I shared stories about service, not the classified aspects but the human ones, about camaraderie, about survival, about making decisions under pressure. She absorbed every word, sometimes asking sharp, unexpectedly profound questions. "You're not like the other patients," she said one day, checking my vitals. "Your eyes, there's no cloudiness in them." "Maybe my disease progresses differently," I answered evasively. "Or it doesn't exist at all," she whispered unexpectedly, not raising her eyes from the monitor. My pulse quickened, but I maintained my composure. "What do you mean?" "Some patients, their symptoms don't match their diagnoses." She spoke so quietly that I could barely make out the words. "I'm studying, learning medical literature. What I see here, it's not what should be." I decided to risk it. "Do you keep records of your observations?" She nodded. "In a personal diary, no one knows." "May," I took her hand, allowing myself physical contact for the first time, "you're in danger, if they suspect." "I know," her eyes met mine, fear mixed with determination swirling in them. "But I can't just watch as people are, as they're killed." I finished for her. A long silence, then, "Do you have a plan?" "Partially. I need access to the archive, to the documents." "I have a key card." She touched the pocket of her uniform. "Low-level access, but it opens the archive." Our plan formed quickly. May was to come to my room in the evening under the pretext of an additional check. We decided that the best way to justify spending a long time alone was to create the appearance of romantic interest. The surveillance cameras in the rooms didn't record sound, only images. We could speak freely if it looked like an intimate conversation. When she came that evening, the awkwardness between us was genuine. I told her about the Atacama Desert, one of my last adventures before returning home. She listened, sitting on the edge of my bed, leaning closer to me. For the cameras, this looked like the natural development of sympathy between a young nurse and her patient. "They'll never let you live if they find out what you know," she whispered, leaning to my ear as if for a kiss. "I know, but I need to gather evidence." "Why risk it? We could just report to the police." "Without evidence, Langley is too influential, too respected. Only irrefutable proof will make them believe." Our conversation grew into something more, unexpected for both of us. Her lips pressed against mine in a kiss that started as part of a cover, but quickly became something real. In her touch was the desperation of someone who had held back emotions for too long. When she fell asleep beside me after what happened, I carefully extracted the key card from her uniform pocket and left a note under the pillow. "Sorry. Can't risk your life. Destroy this message. Be careful, they'll stop at nothing." 6. The archive of Eden's Haven was located in the East Wing, on the basement level. At 2 in the morning, I picked the lock to my room and moved along the familiar route through service corridors, avoiding surveillance cameras. May's key card worked perfectly. The archive door silently opened. Inside was a large room with rows of metal cabinets, computers, and document stands. I quickly oriented myself in the organization system, one section for current patients, another for discharged, a sinister euphemism for the deceased. I started with current patients. From my incomplete count, there should have been about 30 people in the hospice. The active patients folder contained 32 cases. I randomly selected several folders and found a common pattern: a wealthy person, a rare or difficult to diagnose disease, rich insurance, minimal real relatives, or their complete absence. In each case, trustees managing the patient's finances. The names of these trustees repeated from case to case, about a dozen of the same people. My own case proved particularly informative. A detailed treatment plan with an exact schedule of dosages for various neurotoxins. Forecast of fatal outcome within 17 days of admission. A complete list of assets, including the house, bank accounts, investments, and most importantly, documents transferring everything to Eliza, with subsequent distribution of a significant portion of funds through a series of shell accounts in offshore zones. In another section of the archive, I discovered the hospice's financial documentation. Over the past 3 years, more than 120 patients had passed through Eden's Haven. The average cost of care ranged from $50,000 to $100,000 a week. But the real money came after death: million-dollar transfers from grateful relatives, insurance payouts, rewritten fortunes. An internal report marked confidential contained profit calculations for the last quarter, more than $40 million. The document was signed by Langley, Mrs. Granger, and another name that made me go cold: E. Harper, Risk Analysis Department. Eliza, not just an accomplice, a key element of the scheme. Not a secretary at an insurance company, but a specialist in selecting potential victims with large insurance policies and without close relatives. In a separate folder, I found her reports, a cold, methodical analysis of potential clients, with assessments of their financial status, social isolation, and legal vulnerability. I photographed each document, uploading the images to an encrypted cloud storage via a phone taken from a staff member during one of my night excursions. When the main evidence was collected, I stumbled upon the final piece of the puzzle: a schedule of new patient arrivals. The next day, a VIP client designated as DK San Francisco was expected. Diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, terminal stage. Insurance: $25 million. Trustee: SK spouse. Special note from Langley: maximum security and confidentiality. Personal meeting at the airport. I was about to leave the archive when I heard voices in the corridor. Guards discussing tomorrow's arrival. Japanese businessman, they say, even arriving with personal security. Not the first time we've worked with foreigners. The main thing is that his Yakuza don't come after him, the second one chuckled. Yakuza, a Japanese businessman with an enormous fortune. Now it's clear, not just another victim, but a figure with a serious criminal past and connections. They didn't understand what fire they were playing with. I slipped back to my room half an hour before the morning rounds. May had awakened, discovered the missing key in my absence. Her note, found under my pillow, was laconic. I believe in you. Be careful. The world of Eden's Haven now appeared before my eyes as a perfectly planned criminal scheme. Not just fraud or deception, serial murders on an industrial scale, disguised as palliative care. Langley, Eliza, and their accomplices had destroyed hundreds of people over the years, building an empire on suffering and death. And soon, a new victim would arrive here. A man capable of turning the whole situation around if, of course, I could reach him before they started treating him. Chapter 3. In special operations, there comes a moment when reconnaissance ends and action begins. My mentor in the Rangers called it the point of no return, when you already know enough to act but not enough to feel safe. I had reached that point. With the evidence collected in the archive, I could have contacted the authorities, but intuition suggested that the time for retreat had passed. The threads of this conspiracy ran too deep, affecting influential people. To destroy the scheme required not just information, but a catalyst capable of triggering a chain reaction. And fate, it seemed, had prepared the perfect candidate for this role. 1. The morning turned out unusually hectic for a hospice where time usually flowed with the slowness of dying. Staff scurried through corridors with rehearsed panic, wiping already impeccably clean surfaces, checking schedules, double-checking equipment. Special menus were being prepared in the kitchen. Security had doubled. Sitting in my wheelchair in the common room, I observed the preparations with the outward indifference of a terminal patient and the inner vigilance of an operative. May, using the pretext of measuring my blood pressure, leaned in and whispered, "VIP guest, Japanese billionaire, everyone's in a tizzy." "Not just a billionaire," I slightly shook my head. "Do you know who the Yakuza are?" Her eyes widened. Like practically any Japanese person, she knew perfectly well what that word meant. "They're crazy, bringing here." "Quiet," I squeezed her wrist. "You mustn't show that you know." An hour later, all patients received instructions to remain in their rooms for additional rest. But my room was positioned with a view of the main entrance, and I could observe the important guest's arrival. A convoy of 3 black SUVs stopped at the front entrance exactly at noon. From the first car emerged 4 men, bodyguards with military bearing and professional ability to conceal weapons under civilian clothing. From the second, an elegant elderly Japanese woman in a traditional kimono of silvery blue color and perfectly arranged graying hair. And finally, from the third car, 2 assistants helped an elderly Japanese man exit. Even at a distance, I noted the contradiction. His body seemed fragile, his movements difficult, but his posture remained perfect, his gaze sharp and authoritative. He leaned on an inlaid cane with a silver knob but didn't allow anyone to support him while walking. Despite his apparent weakness, he emanated an inner strength that I had encountered only in people accustomed to commanding others. Langley personally came out to meet the guest, bowing with subservience that looked inappropriate on his usually arrogant face. The Japanese man honored him with only a brief nod. In a moment, they disappeared inside the building. Later, when May brought me dinner, she broke professional protocol by sitting next to me. "His name is Daichi Kobayashi," she informed me, pretending to adjust my pillow. "Officially, head of a trading corporation from San Francisco. Unofficially," she lowered her voice, "in Japan, his family controlled one of the largest Yakuza clans until they were pushed to America in the 70s. What's wrong with him? Terminal stage of pancreatic cancer. That's what the documentation says, but—" Her face darkened. I saw real pancreatic cancer with my brother. Kobayashi doesn't have the characteristic jaundice, cachexia, pain syndrome. Either he's in a miraculous remission, or another fake diagnosis, I finished. But why he's a dangerous man? I looked at her with a heavy gaze. That's exactly why. The more dangerous the victim, the more important it is to ensure they don't suspect anything until the very end. 2. At night, I slipped out of my room again. The hospice had unusual activity for this time, additional security posts, more frequent nurse rounds. The east wing of the second floor was completely blocked off. Kobayashi and his entourage were housed there. I moved like a ghost through service corridors, using routes developed over days of observation. I needed to get to the archive again to learn more about the new patient. The risk increased many times over, but there was no time for caution. The archive was empty as I had anticipated. Kobayashi's folder lay in a special place marked Priority A. Quickly reviewing the documents, I discovered the familiar scheme. Fake test results, fabricated diagnosis, treatment schedule. In one document, I found the contact of the person who directed Kobayashi specifically to Eden's Haven, a certain Dr. Ishikawa from San Francisco Medical Center. The name meant nothing to me, but was worth remembering. I was about to leave when I heard voices in the adjacent room, the administrative office connected to the archive. Among the shelves, I found a convenient position for observation through a ventilation grate. In the office, 4 people met. Langley, Mrs. Granger, the elderly Japanese woman in a kimono, and a young Japanese man, about 35 by appearance, with the physique of a professional fighter and cold-blooded confidence in every movement. I immediately understood that this man was dangerous, not just as a physical threat, but as a predator accustomed to killing without hesitation. Mr. Yamamoto, Langley addressed the young Japanese man, we have fulfilled all confidentiality requirements. All staff contacting the patient have signed additional agreements. Confidentiality doesn't concern me. Yamamoto's voice was soft, with a slight accent. Efficiency concerns me. Time is of critical importance. Kenji is right, the elderly Japanese woman interjected. My husband, for all his weakness, remains a perceptive man. If he suspects something amiss. Mrs. Kobayashi, Langley smiled with professional confidence, we specialize precisely in such cases. The drugs are individually selected. Symptoms will increase gradually, mimicking the natural progression of the disease. And his security, asked Mrs. Granger, they could create problems. Don't worry about that. Setsuko Kobayashi covered a sinister smile with a thin hand. 3 of them already work for Kenji. The others have been eliminated or neutralized. What about the documents? Yamamoto spoke in a businesslike tone. The will, transfer of business rights. All prepared. Our lawyer will meet with Mr. Kobayashi tomorrow. Langley took out a folder. After the first dose of special medications, he'll become more compliant. We'll sign everything. Setsuko unfolded a map on the table that looked like a corporate structure chart. After Daichai's death, control of all legitimate businesses passes to me. In parallel, Kenji consolidates power over operational units. Within a month, we'll unite our clans officially. Through marriage, added Yamamoto, and his hand possessively rested on the shoulder of the woman who was twice his age. The amount of your compensation, Setsuko opened a laptop and turned it toward Langley, is impressive even by our standards. I noticed how Langley's pupils dilated. Even from my position, the sum with numerous zeros was visible. Of course, continued Setsuko, we expect special attention to details. I personally choose the drugs. My husband Daichai must suffer, slowly. I've waited for this moment for 40 years. In her words rang such icy hatred that even Langley, accustomed to death, looked uncomfortable. By the end of the week, we can begin the main phase. Within 10 days, partial paralysis will occur, then coma. Death within 2 weeks maximum. Excellent, Yamamoto nodded. Then everything is proceeding according to plan. I carefully retreated, realizing that I had witnessed not just another murder within the walls of Eden's Haven, but a crime that could lead to a bloody war between Yakuza clans, and I found myself at the epicenter. 3. The plan formed by itself. I had to talk to Kobayashi, warn him, but how to approach a man who is guarded around the clock. For 2 days I observed, studied the schedule of rounds, the movement of personnel, the placement of guards. On the third night, an opportunity presented itself. I noticed that at 3 in the morning there was a changing of the guards and a brief period when surveillance was minimal. At this same time, one of the nurses made rounds. Rita, a full-figured woman with chronic fatigue on her face and a habit of checking patients as quickly as possible. Kobayashi's room was at the very end. A guard slept in a chair before the door. Bypassing him wasn't possible. I had to act more directly. Using the technique of silent strangling that I had perfected in hundreds of special operations, I put him into a deep sleep without causing serious harm. Silently opening the door, I found myself in luxurious quarters, more resembling a five-star hotel room than a hospital ward. In the subdued light of night lamps, I distinguished a silhouette in the bed and another silhouette in a chair nearby. "I've been waiting for you to come," a hoarse voice spoke in Japanese. I froze, ready for any development. The night lamp brightened, and I saw Daichi Kobayashi sitting in bed. Beside him in the chair sat a gray-haired Japanese man with a stony face, a personal bodyguard, keeping his hand under his jacket, undoubtedly on the handle of a weapon. "Do you speak Japanese?" Kobayashi asked in English. "Only basic phrases," I answered, slowly raising my hands. "I came not to harm but to warn." "About what?" There was neither fear nor surprise in his tone. "That your diagnosis is fake. That your wife and a man named Kenji Yamamoto are planning your slow murder. And that Eden's Haven is not a hospice but a death factory." Kobayashi said something in Japanese to his guard, who reluctantly removed his hand from under his jacket. "Sato says that if you wanted to kill me, you would have already tried," Kobayashi translated. "And I say that if you intended to warn about a conspiracy, you would have invented a more plausible story. Your wife is in collusion with Yamamoto. She herself chooses the drugs that will poison you so that you slowly suffer before death. They plan to unite the clans after your death, through marriage." Something flashed in the old man's eyes, a barely noticeable burst of anger, immediately hidden under a mask of impassivity. "Good story," he smiled thinly. "But why should I believe a dying American who crept into my room in the middle of the night?" "Because I'm not dying. Neither are you. They're trying to kill me exactly the same way they plan to kill you." I briefly told my story about the fake diagnosis, the betrayal by my wife and Langley, about their scheme with the hospice. Kobayashi listened without interrupting, his face remaining inscrutable. "Evidence," he finally said. "Even assuming I believed your story, I need evidence. I have recordings of their conversations, copies of documents about how they falsify diagnoses and slowly kill patients with special drugs, and yesterday's recording of a conversation where your wife literally plans your murder and subsequent marriage to Yamamoto." I took out my phone and played the video recorded through the ventilation grate. On the screen, Setsuko Kobayashi discussed the details of the plan with Langley and Kenji. The old man's face remained stony, but I noticed how the knuckles of his fingers gripping the blanket whitened. "If you're telling the truth," he said after a long pause, "then why come to me instead of the authorities?" "Because this scheme is too deeply rooted. They have connections, money, influence. Even with evidence, the investigation could take months, and we don't have months. We have days, maybe hours." I looked him straight in the eyes. "But you have what I don't: power, resources, people ready to act immediately." Kobayashi exchanged glances with his bodyguard, then nodded. Sato, check the guard outside the door. While Sato carried out the order, Kobayashi studied me intently. You're a former military man, special forces. Yes, 15 years of service. It shows in how you move, how you assess danger. He smiled almost imperceptibly. In another situation, I would offer you a job. Sato returned and reported something in Japanese. The guard is unconscious but alive, Kobayashi translated. That's true, you could have killed but chose not to. He paused, then made a decision. I'll give you a chance to prove your story, but if you're lying... If I'm lying, I'm already a dead man, I replied. Either way. Sato, Kobayashi addressed the bodyguard, activate the Sakura protocol. Immediately. The bodyguard took out a phone and typed a short message, then nodded. Now listen carefully, Kobayashi gestured for me to sit. You have just set in motion a mechanism that cannot be stopped. In 12 hours, my people will arrive here, real ones, not traitors. If you lied, they will kill you. If you told the truth. Then we both need to survive until those 12 hours. I finished for him. Exactly, nodded Kobayashi. So how do I avoid these special drugs? 4. In the morning, Eden's Haven functioned as usual. Nurses made rounds, patients received their medications, staff exchanged routine phrases. But I felt an underlying tension in the air. Something had changed. Security in the VIP section doubled. Unfamiliar security service employees appeared at the main entrance, people with the cold eyes of professional fighters. According to the plan developed at night with Kobayashi, I was to continue playing the role of a terminal patient, while he maintained the appearance of cooperation with the treatment. We agreed on a system for safely disposing of toxic drugs and alarm signals in case of an unforeseen situation. At noon, May found an opportunity to discreetly pass me a note. Something's happening. New guards, everyone's nervous. I nodded to her, letting her know I was aware. In the common room, where they wheeled me after lunch, the atmosphere seemed deceptively calm. But I noticed how Mrs. Granger feverishly whispered something to Langley, who increasingly glanced at his watch. At 2 o'clock, the first deviation from the usual routine occurred. Setsuko Kobayashi, accompanied by Kenji, unexpectedly left the hospice on urgent business. I watched as their car rapidly exited the gates. By 3 o'clock, I had a distinct feeling that the plan had been uncovered. Perimeter security tripled. Orderlies and nurses received instructions not to let patients out of their rooms due to quarantine measures. Langley locked himself in his office with several of Yamamoto's men. I decided to act. Using the pretext of an urgent need for the bathroom, I slipped away from the nurse's supervision and headed toward Kobayashi's room. The corridor was empty, which in itself was an alarming sign. Kobayashi's room door was ajar. Inside, I discovered 2 guards, both dead, with neat puncture wounds at the base of the skull, classic signature of a professional killer. Kobayashi himself was gone. Someone had betrayed him. Was he still alive? Setsuko and Kenji had obviously learned about the Sakura protocol and decided to act immediately. Perhaps one of the guards was a traitor, but where had they taken Kobayashi? A sudden burst of automatic fire outside the building answered my question. Looking out the window, I saw a firefight break out at the main gates between the hospice security and a group of Asians in formal suits who arrived in black SUVs. Kobayashi's people had arrived earlier than planned. Almost simultaneously, shots rang out from the west wing. The battle had begun on 2 flanks. Kobayashi's forces attacked from outside, while traitors working for Kenji opened fire from within. I rushed back to the common room. Panic had already gripped the staff and patients. May was trying to calm disoriented elderly people when I grabbed her arm. "Where's Langley? Where's my wife?" "They're in the East Wing," her voice trembled. "What's happening?" "Clan war. The building will soon become a battlefield. I quickly explained the situation, omitting details of my involvement. We need to evacuate the patients, May said resolutely, and the staff. Are there emergency exits? Only through the basement. There are technical tunnels leading to the boiler room, but the doors are locked and... A new series of shots, now closer, interrupted her. Evacuate everyone you can to the service staircase in the west wing. I firmly gripped her shoulders. I'll deal with the doors and distract the attackers. While May organized the nurses for evacuation, I headed to my room. In the mattress, in a specially carved hollow, were components for improvised explosive devices that I had assembled from medical supplies over the past few days. Not lethal, but powerful enough to distract attention and disable doors. With 3 such devices, I descended to the basement via the service staircase. As expected, the evacuation exit doors were locked with an electronic lock, and it wasn't possible to power it down. I set the first device on the door hinges, directing the blast wave to minimize risk to people who would evacuate through this exit. The thunder of gunshots and screams from above intensified. I had little time left. 10 minutes later, the situation completely spiraled out of control. Kenji's men engaged in a firefight with Kobayashi's people throughout the hospice grounds. Patients and staff were caught in the crossfire. I activated the first device. A muffled pop, and the evacuation exit doors collapsed. "Over here," I shouted to May, who was leading a group of 5 nurses and a dozen patients in wheelchairs. "Move through the tunnel to the boiler room. There should be an exit to the surface there." "And you," fear read in her eyes. "I have unfinished business." 2 more nurses appeared from around the corner, accompanying a group of patients. "Go," I commanded. "I'll hold them off." When the last evacuees disappeared into the tunnel, I went up to the first floor. The chaos intensified. Yakuza from both factions were engaged in fierce firefight in the corridors. Glass shards, shell casings, and blood covered the floor. I made my way to the administrative wing. I needed to find Langley and Eliza, who, I was sure, were trying to destroy all evidence of the criminal scheme. On the way, I encountered one of Kenji's fighters aiming at the back of a fleeing nurse. Recognizing May, I acted instantly. My lunge was lightning fast. Grip, turn, sharp movement, and his neck cracked under my hands. I picked up his dropped pistol. "Jack," May stared at me in horror. "I told you to leave." "I couldn't. There are people with katanas around the corner." Her voice trembled. I took her hand. "Stay close and do everything I say." Navigating through the firefight, I led May to the kitchen, which remained a relatively safe zone. "Wait here," I pointed to a storage room with a heavy metal door. "Lock yourself in and don't open for anyone." Returning to the combat zone, I continued my search for Langley and Eliza. Intuition suggested they would head to the server room, where all digital archives were stored. On the way, I discovered Kobayashi, not in captivity as I feared, but surrounded by 4 of his bodyguards, including the loyal Sato. He moved with surprising speed for his age, giving commands in Japanese. "Kobayashi-san," I called out to him. "Ah, the former Marine," he nodded to me like an old acquaintance. "You have done me a service and I am in your debt, but now I have my own business." "Are you looking for your wife?" "And her new interest, yes." "They're heading to the server room, in the basement east wing. That's where all the archives are." Kobayashi gave a short order, and 3 guards disappeared in the indicated direction. He turned to me. "Weapon." I handed him the pistol picked up from the dead fighter. To my surprise, he declined. "I prefer something more personal." Sato extracted 2 traditional katanas from a long case and handed one to Kobayashi. "Come," the old man smiled, and there was something primally terrifying in that smile. "Show us the way." 6. The server room was located on the lower basement level, a massive space with rows of racks, blinking indicators, and humming cooling systems. We gained access through the service entrance, passing two security posts where Kobayashi's men silently eliminated Kenji's fighters. Through the glass door, I saw Langley and Eliza. They were frantically working with one of the server racks, extracting hard drives and placing them in a metal case. Nearby stood Mrs. Granger with an automatic pistol in hand, nervously looking around. "How shall we proceed?" I asked Kobayashi. "My people will take care of the woman with the weapon," he replied. "You take the man and the wife." He paused. "The wife is mine." At his signal, we simultaneously burst into the room. One of Kobayashi's guards instantly neutralized Mrs. Granger with a precise throw of a shuriken. The second took control of the perimeter. Langley pulled a pistol from under his coat, but I was already beside him. A kick to the wrist, grab, jerk, and he was on the floor, his weapon in my hands. Jack, his eyes widened in surprise. "How?" "Thought I was dying." I hit him with the pistol handle, splitting his lip. "Surprise." Eliza froze with an external hard drive in her hands. Her gaze darted between me and Kobayashi, who was slowly approaching, holding the katana as if it were an extension of his arm. "Jack," she addressed me with a fake smile, "there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "It's not like that," she backed away. "It was Langley who forced me." "Lies," I cut her off. "Even now you continue to lie." At the back of the room, I noticed a technical door leading to an adjacent compartment. Eliza saw it too. She continued to slowly move in that direction. "Give me the disc," I demanded. "It's evidence of all the murders committed within these walls." "And what will you do with it?" she suddenly smirked. "Go to the police. Think they'll believe you, a sick man on pills, rather than a respected doctor and law-abiding wife." "Give me the disc," I repeated, taking a step forward. Suddenly Langley, whom I was keeping at gunpoint, pressed a hidden button under the table. A piercing siren filled the room, and water gushed from the ceiling. The fire suppression flooding system had activated. "You're too late," Langley shouted over the noise of the water. "All data will be destroyed." The water rapidly rose, reaching the ankles, and the electrical wiring began to spark. "Kobayashi-san, we need to leave." Sato grabbed his master's shoulder. At that moment, Eliza took advantage of the commotion, threw a chair at me, and rushed to the technical door. Langley broke free from my grip and followed her. "The disc," I shouted, lunging after them. Kobayashi gestured for his people to retreat, but he himself moved after me. The water was already up to our knees, and electrical discharges were becoming more intense. Gunshots sounded ahead. Langley had run into Kenji's men, who were obviously also looking for the server room. I rushed forward down the flooded corridor. Langley stood surrounded by three of Kenji's fighters, clutching the metal case with discs to his chest. Noticing me, he shouted something in Japanese, and the fighters opened fire. I barely managed to take cover behind a concrete column. The water level continued to rise. The electrical wiring sparked even more intensely, creating a deadly hazard. I assessed the situation with the cool-headedness developed through years in special forces. To my right was a technical panel. Using the pistol handle, I pried it open and discovered electrical cables. Quickly connecting wires, I created a short circuit, and a powerful explosion destroyed one of the partitions, creating an escape route. In the chaos of the explosion and the water rushing through the breach, I lunged at Langley. Kenji's fighters, disoriented, retreated. Langley tried to pull out a pistol but slipped in the water. The case fell from his hands, and the current carried it toward the breach. I dove, ignoring the pain from electrical discharges penetrating the water. Grabbing the case by the handle, I lunged toward the hole in the wall, through which water was already gushing, creating a powerful flow into the adjacent room. The last thing I saw before the current swept me away, Eliza and Langley, running in the opposite direction, where Kenji's men met them. The flow carried me into some technical room filled with equipment. I struggled to climb onto an elevation, still clutching the case with hard drives, evidence of dozens of murders committed in Eden's Haven. Somewhere in another part of the building, the firefight between Yakuza clans continued. But for me, the war was temporarily over. I had obtained what I came for. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from May. Evacuated, all police in the county heading your way. Where are you? I looked at the case in my hands, then at the raging water that had cut off the way back. Looking for a way out, I have evidence. Wait outside. Police sirens were already audible in the distance. Yakuza from both factions would be eager to leave the territory before the authorities arrived. I needed to disappear too. With this evidence, I had become a target for too many people. I found a service staircase leading upward. The war between the clans was just beginning, and I, against my will, had become part of it. But now I needed to do just one thing: survive to use the obtained evidence and stop the madness that had been happening within the walls of Eden's Haven. Chapter 4. We spent the night in an abandoned motel on the outskirts of town. Exhausted, soaked to the skin, with a metal case handcuffed to my wrist, I looked like a fugitive criminal, which I was, at least from the law's perspective. Breaking into the police perimeter around Eden's Haven, May had saved me literally from under the noses of SWAT, pulling up the car to the service exit. I tumbled out of the hospice doors just as police began a massive assault on the building. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was Kobayashi surrounded by his men, calmly surrendering to authorities like a law-abiding citizen accidentally caught up in an attack. I can imagine the expression on the police officers' faces when they learned exactly who they had detained, and their even greater surprise when, an hour later, his lawyers secured his immediate release. The morning news was filled with headlines about a bloody massacre in an elite hospice and a war of Japanese gangs on U.S. soil. Not a word about surviving patients or medical experiments. Apparently, someone had taken care of controlling the information. 1. The phone rang exactly at 8:00 a.m. Number hidden, but I knew who it was. You have my evidence. I have your enemies, Kobayashi's voice said without unnecessary greetings. Time to finish what we started. He gave an address in the mountains and a meeting time. Then, without pause, I'll send a car. Don't worry about surveillance. The line went dead. May looked at me with concern. Over the past night, a strange, almost unnatural closeness had developed between us, people who had survived a catastrophe together. She had treated my wounds. I had told her the full version of the story. It's the Yakuza, she whispered. You don't understand what you're getting into. I do, I kissed her forehead. That's exactly why you're staying here. No, Listen, I gripped her shoulders. You saved dozens of lives yesterday. That's more than many accomplish in an entire lifetime. But now a game begins that you can't exit. Yamamoto's people will be looking for witnesses. You need to disappear. I took one of the hard drives from the case, a duplicate containing the main evidence. If something happens to me, send this to the FBI. Only if something happens to me, I emphasized. Otherwise, they'll come for you. As a farewell, she whispered a prayer in Japanese. I didn't understand the words, but the intonation was clearly protective. A black SUV with tinted windows arrived exactly at the appointed time. Behind the wheel sat a taciturn Japanese man with a face that seemed carved from stone. He didn't speak a word during the entire journey, only once searching me for weapons and bugs, finding just the case with discs. The journey into the mountains took 3 hours. We wound through secondary roads, changed direction several times, checking for surveillance. Finally, the car turned onto a private road leading deep into the forest. After a mile, massive gates in traditional Japanese style appeared, with armed guards standing on both sides. Kobayashi Ryosoku, the driver pronounced with reverence, and the gates swung open. Kobayashi's estate was impressive in scale and beauty. A winding road climbed the mountainside, surrounded by ancient trees. Along the way, I noticed several camouflaged guard posts and surveillance cameras skillfully integrated into the landscape. At the hilltop was a traditional Japanese compound, an extensive complex of buildings in feudal-era style, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. The central house greeted me with absolute silence, broken only by the soft sound of a bamboo fountain in the inner courtyard. Sato, Kobayashi's faithful bodyguard, waited at the entrance. "The master awaits you in the tea house," he said with a slight bow, "but first you must see something." We passed through a suite of rooms decorated with minimalist elegance, rice paper, dark wood, calligraphic scrolls on the walls. In the last room, Sato slid a panel, revealing a descent to an underground level. What I saw below resembled a high-tech command center. Monitors, tracking systems, communication equipment. On the main screen was a live feed from a drone, a luxurious coastal estate with an ocean view. "Yamamoto's hideout," Sato explained. "We located them 4 hours ago." On other screens, I saw thermal images of people inside the house. In the central room sat 4 figures, their silhouettes outlined in red. "Target objects confirmed," said one of the operators. "Visual identification, Kenji Yamamoto, Setsuko Kobayashi, Alexander Langley, and Eliza Harper." I moved closer, peering at the blurred thermal contours. They were feasting as if celebrating a victory. Champagne glasses, embraces, laughter, confident in their safety, confident they had escaped. "When?" I asked Sato. "Tonight. Master Kobayashi wants you to participate in the operation." I was escorted to another room, where tactical gear lay on a long table, black clothing, night vision devices, communication equipment, and weapons both modern and ancient. "Choose what's familiar to you," said Sato. "You were an assault trooper, weren't you?" I touched familiar items, tactical belt, combat vest, silenced pistol, with a sense of coming home. My body remembered every movement, every gesture of a professional soldier. But alongside the modern equipment lay other items, traditional ninja weapons, shuriken, throwing knives, garrots. "Master Kobayashi believes that sometimes ancient methods are more effective than modern ones," Sato explained, noticing my interest. "Especially when it comes to justice." Justice, a strange word in the mouth of a professional killer. But I was beginning to understand that for Kobayashi and his people, this concept had a special, ritual meaning. When I completed my preparations, I was escorted to the tea house, a small structure deep in the garden, surrounded by flowering cherries. Kobayashi sat on tatami before a low table, where cups of green tea steamed. To my surprise, he looked absolutely healthy. The sickly pallor had disappeared, his movements became precise and confident, his gaze sharp. Before me sat not a dying old man, but a dangerous predator temporarily assuming the form of a sage. "The toxins have been purged from the system," he explained, noticing my surprise. "The body remembers strength even when the mind forgets." He gestured for me to sit opposite him. "Tonight we will restore balance," he said, pouring tea. "Are you ready to participate?" "I'm ready to finish what I started." Kobayashi smiled almost imperceptibly. "That is a warrior's reason, not a philosopher's, but it will suffice for tonight." 2. The aerobot lowered us onto the roof of Yamamoto's mansion at 2:13 a.m., the time when the human organism reaches the lowest point of its circadian rhythm. The guards were neutralized silently, tranquilizer darts, garrots, hand-to-hand techniques. No gunshots, no noise. Our group split into 3 teams. The first, under Sato's command, blocked all exits. The second, led by a gray-haired veteran named Takeshi, disabled security and communication systems. The third, consisting of me and two young Kobayashi fighters, was to capture the targets. I moved like a ghost through the corridors of the house, using all the skills acquired over years of special operations. The night vision device showed thermal signatures of people through walls, 4 figures in the main bedroom on the second floor. Judging by poses and movements, 2 were sleeping, 2 were awake. We synchronized the attack on signal, smoke grenades with a mild sedative effect through ventilation, simultaneous penetration through windows and doors. The targets had not a second for reaction. When I burst into the bedroom, Eliza and Langley slept in a huge bed, while Kenji and Setsuko quietly conversed in armchairs by an open bar. A pistol lay on the table between them, but Yamamoto didn't even manage to reach for it. A miniature dart pierced his neck, instantly paralyzing his body but leaving his consciousness clear. Setsuko tried to scream, but my hand already covered her mouth. "Quiet," I whispered in English. "If you want to live, don't make a sound." Her eyes widened when she recognized me. There was no fear in them, only cold fury and something resembling respect. Langley and Eliza were awakened much less delicately. They were dragged from the bed onto the floor, bound and gagged. Eliza, even in this situation, managed to look offended, as if the rude awakening was the worst of what awaited her that night. "Operation complete," I reported via radio. "Objects captured. Losses 0. "Understood," Kobayashi's voice replied. "Transport them to the evacuation point." 15 minutes later, an unmarked helicopter landed on the beach behind the house. The prisoners, bound and hooded, were loaded into the cargo compartment. I sat next to Eliza, watching her chest rise and fall frequently and unevenly in attempts to cope with panic. "Don't be afraid," I said, knowing she could hear me through the hood. "Death won't be quick." It was cruel, but I wanted her to feel at least a drop of the terror experienced by the victims of their scheme, slowly dying in Eden's Haven. The return flight to Kobayashi's estate took less than an hour. All this time, I reflected on the strange turn of fate that had brought me here. Just a week ago, I considered myself dying, prepared to meet the end alone. Now I was participating in the kidnapping and probably subsequent execution of 4 people, including my own wife. What made me better than them? Only that I acted not out of greed, or that they deserved retribution for their crimes. The helicopter landed on a pad deep within Kobayashi's domain. We were met by the master himself, now dressed in traditional kimono, with 2 swords at his belt. "Welcome to Mountain Refuge," he said as the prisoners were unloaded from the helicopter. "Here everything will begin anew." I was escorted to a guest house, a small but elegant structure in traditional style. Inside, clean clothes awaited me, spacious hakama and an upper kimono of dark silk, and a hot bath. "Master Kobayashi asks you to cleanse yourself and rest," said a servant. "The ceremony will begin at dawn." Immersing in hot water, I felt the tension of recent days slowly release from my muscles. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself simply to be, not to plan, not to analyze, not to prepare for the worst. When I closed my eyes, what appeared before my inner vision were not nightmares of war, not Eliza's betrayal, but May's face, calm, trusting, full of light that my life had so lacked. At dawn, I was awakened by a soft knock at the door. Sato came to escort me to the main house. "Master Kobayashi awaits you in the dojo," he said. We passed through gardens shrouded in morning mist to an ancient structure of dark wood. Inside the dojo, the floor was covered with traditional tatami, the walls adorned with calligraphic scrolls and weapons of different epochs. In the center was a small platform. Kobayashi sat in the traditional seiza position, dressed in ceremonial black kimono with his clan's crest on the back. Beside him on cushions sat the elders, gray-haired, severe men with faces marked by time and experience. I was led to a cushion opposite Kobayashi. I sat, trying to imitate his posture, though the unaccustomed position of my legs caused discomfort. Today we conduct an ancient ritual of honor cleansing, Kobayashi spoke in impeccable English. In your culture, this might be called a trial, but that's not quite right. A trial separates the guilty and the punishment. Our ritual unites them. He made a sign, and the dojo doors swung open. The prisoners were brought in one by one, each under the escort of 2 guards. They had been dressed in white hakama without belts, clothing symbolizing the transitional state between life and death. Each will be given the opportunity to recognize their crimes, continued Kobayashi, and each will be offered redemption through suffering. The prisoners were seated on their knees in a row, facing the elders. I noticed that only Setsuko maintained dignity in this position. The others looked awkward and tense. We shall begin, Kobayashi nodded to his people. 3. Langley was chosen first for cleansing. 4 warriors in traditional garb led him to the center of the dojo, where a strange wooden structure resembling a medical stand had already been set up. It's a prop from kabuki theater, Kobayashi explained, noticing my confusion. For torture scenes in historical plays, today it will serve its original purpose. Langley was tied to the structure in a standing position, arms and legs fixed, head held immobile by a special device. Next to him, they installed a modern medical stand with IV drips and monitors. Kobayashi rose and approached him. In his hands, he held a tablet with a long list. Dr. Alexander Langley, his voice sounded formal, almost detached. You swore to do no harm, but you have caused the deaths of so many that your name deserves a place alongside the worst murderers in history. Langley tried to say something, but the gag in his mouth turned words into inarticulate mumbling. Now I will read the names of those you killed with your medicines, continued Kobayashi. And for each name, you will receive a dose of the same drugs with which you poisoned your victims. He nodded, and a man in a white coat, apparently the clan's personal physician, connected Langley to an IV. Herbert Wilson, 67 years old, diagnosed with non-existent brain cancer, date of death, March 15, 2022. Langley jerked when the clear liquid flowed through the tube into his vein. Elizabeth Chang, 72 years old, diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, date of death, April 30, 2022. Another drop. Langley's body began to twitch, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Thomas Brennan, 65 years old, diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, date of death, May 18, 2022. With each name, and there were dozens, Langley's condition worsened. First came tremors, then twitches progressing to convulsions. His eyes would roll back, then widen in terror. Saliva flowed from his mouth, his body shook with tremors. I observed this with conflicting feelings. Part of me, the soldier who had seen too much death, dispassionately evaluated what was happening as just retribution. Another part, the man raised in Western traditions of law, experienced deep internal discomfort. Kobayashi seemed to notice my state. In your culture, this appears barbaric, he said quietly. But think, wasn't what he did to his victims more cruel? They died over weeks, months, not understanding what was happening, mourning life they could still have lived. He's getting a concentrated experience of his evil deeds. This isn't cruelty, it's justice in its purest form. I didn't respond, but I understood his logic, though I couldn't fully accept it. Western justice had moved too far from the physical dimension of crime, had become too abstract. In cold prison cells, criminals rarely confronted the real essence of the evil they had committed. When the list was fully read, 127 names, Langley was in a semi-conscious state. His skin had acquired a yellowish tint, his eyes sunken, his body racked with uncontrollable tremors. He had experienced the symptoms of all the diseases he had fabricated. Take him away, Kobayashi commanded. Let him spend the night reflecting on the choices he made. The semi-conscious Langley was carried out of the dojo. In his eyes, I saw something I had never observed before, absolute understanding of the evil committed. 4. The next day, two transparent glass cages were brought into the dojo, installed side by side on the platform. They resembled aquariums, large enough to hold an adult but not allowing one to lie down or properly sit. Eliza and a pale Langley from yesterday were placed in these cages, each in their own. Pipes were connected to the top of the cages, and valves were installed in the ceiling. This ritual is called the choice of truth, Kobayashi explained, returning to his place. Each person must make a choice, save themselves or the one they supposedly love. He nodded, and one of the guards removed the gag from Eliza's lips. "This is illegal," was the first thing she shouted. "You'll all answer for kidnapping and—" "Silence," Kobayashi said quietly, and there was such power in his voice that Eliza fell silent mid-sentence. "The rules are simple. Each victim's name you name gives you a chance for salvation. The water in your cage will recede, but with each name a bamboo spike will fall into your partner's cage." He pointed to the ceiling above Langley's cage, where sharp bamboo spikes were visible, held by a mechanism. "The choice is yours," Kobayashi concluded. A valve opened in Eliza's cage, and water began slowly filling the space, rising to her ankles. "You're insane," she screamed, panic breaking through her usual mask of self-control. "I don't know anything about the victims." "A strange statement for someone who selected them from insurance documents," Kobayashi noted. "Perhaps refresh your memory." He unfolded a tablet, showing Eliza a document with her signature, a list of potential clients for Eden's Haven with detailed financial data. The water rose, already reaching her knees. Eliza cast a desperate glance at Langley, but he maintained a stony expression, staring at a single point before him. "Richard Hodgkins," she suddenly cried out. "Oil magnate from Texas, insurance for $12 million. The valve above her cage closed and the water level slightly decreased. Simultaneously from the mechanism above Langley's cage, a thin bamboo spike fell, piercing his shoulder. He made no sound, only jerked from pain. "Arthur Westingfield, banker, $15 million insurance." Another spike fell, piercing Langley's forearm. He continued to remain silent, but his eyes betrayed increasing pain. Eliza looked at him, then at the water which had begun to rise again, and something changed in her face. The mask finally fell away, revealing her true essence, cold, calculating selfishness. "Garrett Clayton, federal judge, $10 million. Alina Price, media mogul's widow, $18 million. Charles Davenport, industrialist, $20 million. With each name, spikes fell one after another, turning the doctor's body into something resembling a porcupine. Blood ran down the bamboo, coloring the cage floor crimson. But he didn't beg for mercy, didn't ask her to stop, just looked at Eliza with an expression gradually shifting from shock to understanding. Understanding betrayal, the worst pain of all. Eliza continued listing names, one after another, without hesitation, without regret. Names of people sent to death for money. Her memory proved phenomenal. She remembered not only surnames but also insurance amounts and dates of death. When the list was exhausted, another 57 names, the water in her cage had receded to her ankles, while Langley presented a horrific sight. Wounded, bleeding, but still alive and conscious. "Interesting," said Kobayashi. "You didn't hesitate for a second, sacrificing the man with whom you planned to spend your life after killing your husband." Eliza looked at him with unexpected directness. "I never planned to spend my life with him. He was a tool like everyone else." Langley emitted a guttural sound, half groan, half chuckle. "And you were a poor tool," he pronounced with difficulty. "Unreliable." Kobayashi nodded, as if receiving confirmation of a long-held theory. "Take both away. We've learned all we need to know." As they were carried out, the bloody Langley and trembling but unharmed Eliza, I caught my former wife's gaze. There was no remorse or fear in it, only cold calculation. Even now, she was assessing chances, looking for a way out, calculating options. I realized I had never truly known this woman. 5. The last to appear before the Council of Elders was Setsuko Kobayashi, the Yakuza boss's wife, the adulteress. Unlike the others, she maintained a dignity that neither captivity nor humiliating clothing could conceal. She was led to the center of the dojo and seated on her knees on a special mat. To my surprise, Daichi Kobayashi rose and left his place, ceding chairmanship to the eldest council member. For this ritual, Master Kobayashi cannot be the judge, Sato explained to me in a quiet voice. A husband does not judge his wife. It is clan law. The elder, dry, with skin resembling parchment, but with piercing eyes full of energy, spoke in Japanese. Sato translated for me. Setsuko Kobayashi, born Ikigawa, today you stand before the council not as the wife of the clan head, but as a betrayer of blood and honor. Your crime is that you broke sacred vows and plotted the death of your husband, lord and clan head. Setsuko responded in Japanese, her voice sounding calm and melodious. She says she acted in the clan's interests, Sato translated. That Master Kobayashi had become too old and conservative for the modern world, that his adherence to traditions was leading the clan to decline. The elder shook his head. If you see flaws in the leader, a wife's duty is to point them out and help correct them. A clan member's duty is to voice their opinion at council. An honorable person's duty is to issue a challenge openly. But you chose the spider's path, poison, darkness, and betrayal. Setsuko said something in reply. Her tone hardened, her eyes narrowed. She says there's no place for samurai in the Yakuza world anymore, Sato translated. That those who survive are those who adapt. That women have always been men's shadows and could only obtain the power they deserved through deception. The elder listened without interrupting, then nodded, as if hearing exactly what he expected. The council has reached a decision, he pronounced. Setsuko Kobayashi no longer exists for the clan. The exclusion ceremony will take place now. At his signal, clan members entered the dojo, more than 20 men and several women of various ages. Each carried a piece of white cloth. One by one, they approached Setsuko, cut a piece of cloth with a special knife, and threw it into a bronze bowl placed before her. The cloth in the bowl was set alight, and thin smoke rose to the ceiling. Symbolic destruction of all connections, Sato explained. After this, Setsuko ceases to exist as a person for the clan. Her name will never be spoken, her images will be destroyed, memory of her will be erased. To my surprise, Daichi Kobayashi himself didn't participate in the ceremony. He stood apart, observing with a face devoid of any expression. When the fire in the bowl burned out, Setsuko was lifted to her feet and led from the dojo. Her face remained impassive, but in her eyes I caught something resembling fear, the first sign of emotion she had allowed herself to show. "Where are they taking her?" I asked Sato. "To the meditation grave," he replied. "A traditional place where traitors spend their final days reflecting on their crimes. A small pit in the ground, covered with a grate, with minimal access to air and water." "How long will she spend there?" "As long as her soul requires for purification. Perhaps a day, perhaps a week, perhaps forever. Master Kobayashi will decide." When the ceremony concluded, I noticed that Kobayashi had disappeared. He was neither in the dojo nor in the main house. "He has gone up the mountain," said Sato, noticing my search, "for meditation, and asked you to join him at dawn." 6. The mountain path leading to the summit appeared ancient. Stones forming steps had been smoothed by centuries of footfalls. I ascended in the pre-dawn twilight, feeling a strange peace. After everything experienced in recent days, betrayal, mortal danger, cruelty, this climb seemed purifying. Kobayashi waited on a flat plateau overlooking the valley, his estate, and distant mountain ridge. He sat in meditation posture, facing east, where the sky was already beginning to lighten. I sat beside him, maintaining silence. For some time, we simply watched as the first rays of sunlight touched the mountain peaks, gradually descending into the valley, coloring everything in golden and rose hues. "Beautiful," I finally said. "Each sunrise is a reminder," Kobayashi replied, "that even the longest night ends, and that every beginning contains within itself an ending." He turned to me. "What do you plan to do next, Jack Harper?" I pondered. This question hadn't crossed my mind in the chaos of recent days. The evidence of Eden's Haven crimes. It should become public. Should it? Kobayashi looked at me intently. Consider the consequences. A public scandal. An investigation that will affect hundreds of people, including surviving patients and their families. Years of court proceedings where victims will have to relive their traumas again and again. And what results? Langley and your wife receive prison sentences. Is that justice? I was silent, considering his words. "There is another path," Kobayashi continued. "My people have already identified all victims of the scheme. We can return stolen money to their families, anonymously, through a series of foundations and trusts. We can provide medical help to those who survived, and we can guarantee that the guilty will never harm another living soul." "It's not legal," I observed. "Justice is not always law," Kobayashi answered. "Sometimes it's balance." He retrieved from his kimono folds a small object wrapped in silk cloth. Unwrapping it, he showed me an ancient dagger in lacquered scabbard, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "This kaikin has belonged to my family for 400 years. It was carried by clan women to protect their honor." He extended the dagger to me. "Now it's yours." Why? I hesitated to take the heirloom. "Because you understand the price of honor and the pain of equilibrium. You're a Western man, but your soul is familiar with Eastern concepts of duty and justice." He placed the dagger in my hands. "This isn't just a weapon. It's a symbol of responsibility. Every rupture requires reunification. Every disruption of balance requires restoration." I accepted the dagger, feeling a strange weight that seemed to emanate not from metal and wood, but from centuries of history and tradition. "And what about Eliza?" I asked. "She received her lesson. Now the choice is theirs," Kobayashi shrugged. "Your wife, she's lost to herself. Her punishment is to be herself until the end of her days." The sun rose above the horizon, flooding the valley with light. Kobayashi stood, leaning on his cane, once again an old man, but filled with inner strength that seemed to flow from the earth itself. "I have a proposition," he said. "I need a person who understands both worlds, East and West, violence and mercy, law and justice. A person who can become a bridge." I gazed at the rising sun, feeling something within me, long frozen, beginning to thaw. Life, which I had considered finished, received a new beginning. The hourglass had turned. "I'll consider your offer," I answered, rising beside him. Kobayashi smiled, for the first time truly sincerely. "Good. Contemplation is the beginning of wisdom." We began our descent down the ancient path. With each step, the past remained behind, and the future, undefined but full of possibilities, unfolded before me like a scroll with a yet unwritten story. Justice is not always law. Sometimes it's balance. These words of Kobayashi echoed in my mind, and I understood they would become a compass in the new life I was about to build. The world, like myself, had changed irrevocably. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you.